Hello all, welcome back. Today we'll learn the new lesson which is functional aesthetics and experience design. Let's see what else all we have in this lesson. Let's see what are all the outlines we are going to cover in this lesson. 1. Functional design. Then we'll learn in details about functional design. Then we'll go to aesthetics design. Then we'll see aesthetics, some examples, then some principles on aesthetics. Then we'll see the functional versus aesthetic design and factors to aesthetics and functionalities. Then experience design, history of user experience design, and 3 observations on experience design are the outlines. Let's go one by one. First, we'll understand what is functional design. About functional design, let me tell you, it is a perpendicular used to simplify the design of hardware and software devices such as computer software or any application software or any applications, and increasingly the 3D models where a functional design can be used. A functional design assures that each modular part of a device has only one responsibility and performs the responsibility with the minimum of side effects on another part. It means then whenever we create any design for a device or imagine in if any part of a device is performing something action, then it should not impact to the another part of the device. A functional design document is part of a set of software specification that outlines the features of the system from the user point of view, as opposed to a technical system design specification which is geared toward the technical implementation of the functional design. This typically includes defining the purpose and scope of the application, describing the user to some details, and identifying where and how the users are going to enter and interact with the system. The system context of use. Additionally, the specification may include the strategy that was used for the design and substantially for design discussion. Robust FSS include a conceptual ERD, which stands for Entity Relationship Diagram, that identifies all of the functional classes within the system that are needed for completing the product use cases, as well as some descriptions of the classes components, their attributes, and their relationships with one another. So this is the robust. He had written an ERD, which has he had included. The ERD is usually used for the database part. So the entire definition says this is for a functional classes where a system that are needed for completing the product use cases. But at the bare minimum, there needs to be some definition of the user interface, the components, and how the users will interact with the components within their environment to achieve their goals. Let's go in details. Let's understand functional in details. A functional specification or Sometimes functional specifications is a formal document used to describe in detail for software developers a product's intended capabilities, appearance, and interaction with users. The functional specification is a kind of guideline and continuing reference point as the developers write the programming code. At least one major product development group used a write the manual first approaches. Before the product exists, they wrote the user's guide for a word processing system, then declared that the user's guide was the functional specification. So, if I would like to explain, every product has a manual guideline, mine a book or a instructions where it says that how the product should be functioned, how was the specifications are used, and where to use. If you get stuck, then you can go through with the user guide and you can solve the problem over on the spot. So you can take a help of the user guide. So here it says that before creating a product, first they had created a user guide. Next, it says the developers were challenged to create a product that matched what the user guide described. Typically, the functional specification for an application program with a series of interactivity windows and dialogues with a user could show the visual appearance of the user interface and describe each of the possible user input action and the program responses action. A functional specification may also contain formal descriptions of a user task, dependency on another products, and usability criteria. Many companies have a guide for developers that describe what topic and product functional specification should contain. Next, for a sense of where the functional specification fits into the development process, here are a typical series of steps in developing a software product. To develop a software product, there are some functional specification for the development process. Let's take a look. First, a requirement. This is a formal statement of what the product planners, informed by their knowledge of the marketplace and specified input from existing or potential customers, believe is needed for a new product or a new version of an existing product. Requirements are usually expressed in terms of narrative statement and in a relatively general way. Next, it's an objectives. Objectives are written by product designers in response to the requirement. They describe in a more specific way what the product will look like. Objectives may describe architectures, protocol, and standards to which the product will conform. Next is, in this sentence, which is measurable objectives are those that set comes criteria by which the end product can be judged. Measurabilities can be in terms of some index of customer satisfaction or in terms of capabilities and task time. Objectives must recognize time and resource constraints. The development schedule is often part or a corollary of the objectives. Then it comes functional specification. The functional specification is the former response to the objectives. It describes all external users and programming interfaces that the product must support. Then it comes design change request. Throughout the development process, as the need for changing to the functional specification is recognized, a formal change is described in a design change request. Then it comes logic specification. The structure of the programming include code model and their relationships, and the data parameters that they pass through each another may be described in a formal document called a logic specification. The logical specification describes internal interface, where a functional specification describes for external users and a programming interface. So, the logical specification which describes internal phase and is for use only by the developers, testers, and later to some extent the programmers that service the product and provide code fixes to the field. Next, it comes user documentation. In general, all of the prescribing documents are used as source material for the technical manual and online information such as help page that are prepared for the product's user. Next could be a test plan. Most development groups have a formal test plan that describes test case that will exercise the programming that is written. Testing is done at the module or unit level, at the component level, and at the system level in context with another product. They can be thrown off as alpha testing. The plan may also allow for beta test. Some companies provide an early version of product to a selected group of customers for testing in a real world situation. So test plan is nothing but it's a formal test plan where once the development is done, a test should be happen for every product. A product, how it runs, what error it occurs, what not, how the functionality is working or not. This all can be tested with the final product. So in this, a test they should plan to whom with whom we should test and how it is going to be tested into the real world situation. Then it comes the final product. After the testing, the final product is got ready. Ideally, the final product is a complete implementation of the functional specification and design changes request, some of which may result from formal testing and beta testing. In test plan, we had seen the alpha testing, but some to get a final product, there should be a alpha testing, beta testing to know to be a best final product will be get finalized. The cycle is then repeated for the next version of the product, being with a new requirement statement which ideally uses feedback from customer about the current product to determine what customer need or want next. So if now this alpha testing, formal testing, beta testing, why they make this all things? For every test gets completed, once the final product is released into the market, like and the user installs or the user start users, then you see on the applications or any of the product, it gives an update. In the update version, in the update, the software or the application gets upgraded to the newer next version of the product. It means with the help of the the feedback of a customer who was using the requirement which has been, with the help of the requirement which the product has been developed, or the scenarios which has been used on the product, the customer or the end user who uses and gives the feedback. With the help of the feedback, the final product, the again the testing goes on, the cycle goes on into the early version and makes the changes, then again makes the testing, and it comes to the next version into the market, which is that the product gets upgraded to the next version or the newer version. Most software makers added to a former development process similarly to the one described below. The hardware development process is similar but includes some additional consideration for the outsourcing of parts and verification of the manufacturing process itself. Now, let's understand what is aesthetics design. It's a concept was born in 1970s as human began started to add art in their culture in significant way. The study of what it meant to be beautiful arose natural near the end of the Renaissance. At present, aesthetics has a large role to play in the usability of a design, such as creating the aesthetic usability effect. This paradox statement states that users get so much attracted towards aesthetically pleasing design that they sometimes ignore some flaws. According to a few studies, the early impression of a layout affects how users will feel about the product it belongs to in the long term, according to Kinsey's Inc. 70% of customers admit to judging a company's credibility as per their business website. Moreover, if your design is not aesthetically pleasing, then it will drain the user's emotion and they might never return to your site, or even worse, they may escape your competitor's site. This means if this is the aesthetically it is not pleased, then the customer who uses the website or an application may not use for the further users. Then the company get lost or the customer get losers from the application or from the company. So the aesthetically pleased should be a good. Aesthetic design can spark positive and productive emotions and increases the user's tolerance towards design problem. What is aesthetic design means actually? Demonstrate knowledge and understanding of the use of aesthetic, which is a shape, form, color, texture, symmetry, and proportion in product design. Imagine if you create any product, a product should take this all the part, like the product shape should be good, the form should be good, the color should be good, the texture of the product should be good, and the proportions of the product should be accurate to use it. So in design term, aesthetic is our description or opinion of an object based on what we see, feel, hear, smell, and even taste. Now let's see some examples of aesthetics. An example of someone who is aesthetic might be an artist. Aesthetic means the pleasant, positive, or artful appearance of a person or a thing. An example of the word in is aesthetic is to say that a particular car is a beautiful. Now imagine if the car, what you see, if it is not beautiful, then will the user will buy the car? No. The same way, that's why nowadays the product should be follow under the aesthetic part. It means that should be a beautiful, that should be a positive, it should be a pleasant. While using so, what does aesthetic include? Aesthetics is a branch of psychology that examines the nature of art and our experience of it. Let's see what includes. An aesthetic experience could include a mixture of feelings such as pleasure, rage, grief, suffering, and joy. While using any product, if you don't feel this any of this, then definitely the product will be a bad product. So these are the importance. Let's understand aesthetic principles. Aesthetic principles that characterize art movements comprise a range of artistic elements such as shape, color, texture, line, use of space, which are to convey values, capture emotions, create unity within an art piece, and communicate meaning. Next, aesthetic principle. Have you ever wondered where Pablo Picasso got his inspiration, or why Jackson Pollock's Packler painting has received such a prominent place in history? So these are the designers, these are the painters in the history. The aesthetic principles that people value in art change dramatically from decade to decade. Aesthetic principles that characterize art movements comprise a range of artistic elements such as shape, color, texture, line, and use of space to convey value, capture emotions, create unity within an art piece, and communicate meaning. Currently, events in politics, global reaction, and culture values changes the way that people see art and what they value aesthetically. There are many different art movements throughout history that each manifest different aesthetic principles. You may have heard of such movements as British pop art. Under that, these all are a few names.